Big Fat Gay Podcast. Happy Halloween. It's spooky season. I'm Trevor Keyson. I'm a super chub, and I am dressed up as Taylor Swift.
I know, I'm terrified.
Quite a costume.
Yeah. It's a lot of stuff cinched and taped and a lace front wig.
Well, my name is Michael Willer. I am a chaser, and I am dressed up as Mama Cass today. There's a lot of other things that are taped up or taped on to get into that costume.
My name is Don Marshall. I'm a big chubby guy living here in sunny Hollywood, and today I am dressed as the Great Pumpkin because I'm spherical.
Hello, my name is Dan Oliverio, author, public speaker, and chubby chaser, and today I am dressed. That's all I gotta say about that.
Okay. None of us believe you.
I actually like the idea of if there's like a diehard couple fan of the podcast doing the I don't know, size swapped Taylor Swift Mama Cass costume.
Oh dear. I think that's almost encouraging fat suits. You realize
It's
Yeah, but in the name of good Halloween costuming.
yes, a very niche Halloween costume. Let's it's spooky season, and we have an extra terrifying pop culture. This week's
I approve.
Thank you.
this week's pop culture is extra terrifying. It's I don't know. When I was like looking at all the stuff, I'm like, it's kind of nightmare themed.
Yeah.
Your worst nightmares brought to life in pop culture. So first off, we have a story
From
about
American Airlines. That's a good start.
They tried real hard.
yeah.
To be fair, they did. So the
They
story,
did everything they could.
The story here is that a lovely person by the name of Sydney Watson took to Twitter to express her outrage at being sandwiched in between two fat people on an airplane, and at the indignation and the horror of that 3-hour flight that she had, as she puts it, they were putting their fat rolls on her arm without her consent.
Yes.
They were sweating on her. They were spilling all over her.
Which I should point out, really shows the importance of consent here, because that's fine with me.
To be fair, she was putting her arm on their flesh without their consent.
It's true. So she posts pictures of these people. Granted, no faces, but she posts pictures of like their sides, like covertly taken on the plane.
Police photos of the crime.
Right, exactly. And like writes this horrible rant.
I mean, am I wrong? When I read this article, I was really interpreting her as raging at the people, not at the airline.
I think
Both.
I think it's
it's
yes. Most of the
both.
people, like fat people, shouldn't exist, and if they have to exist, they shouldn't exist anywhere in my
Yeah,
world.
the fact that she's saying too fat to fly.
Yeah, too fat to fly.
Fuck you.
Yeah.
Fuck you, Sydney.
Okay, so American Airlines tries
She
to
is
do
a bit of a cunt bag.
Cunt bag. I do not use the word cunt or twat liberally, but Sydney, you are a cunt twat.
A cunt twat.
You are an absolute cunt twat, Sydney.
Well, and recognizing this, American Airlines tries to do the politic thing and say, our customers come in all shapes and sizes.
Yeah, and they didn't. They basically said, "We're sorry you were uncomfortable. Our customers come in all shapes and sizes."
Blah.
And then
she
secretly offered her $150.
No, not
Not
at all.
initially.
No.
Not
So,
initially.
and she is not satisfied by this. She is on the warpath. And so there's a slight back and forth between American Airlines and her publicly twittering.
Yeah.
And finally they're like, fine, so sorry for inconvenience. Here's a $150 flight voucher.
Just shut the fuck
Just
up.
just make this go. How much will it cost us to make this go away?
Yeah, literally just make her
I've
stop.
already bought us like 3 mature ratings, and we're like 5 minutes into the episode.
So I mean,
Cunt twat.
got it done.
I bought it. I'm using it.
It has a lot of resonances for me. Like, I think on a corporate level, American Airlines did their best. On the other hand, all the airlines are really horrible about providing enough space for anybody.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm cramped on those
I mean,
flights.
if this woman had any self-awareness, she'd be aware of how much these people on either side of her were horrified by the situation.
Yeah. Well, and she didn't
But
care
empathy
because
level 0.
the last thing she said when she shared that they had given her this $150 credit is because she didn't want credit. She wanted money.
Yep.
She
wants
wanted
a refund.
She wanted
Yeah.
a refund.
Yeah.
And she said, I'd rather take this $150 and give it to them to buy them a gym membership to help them lose weight.
And to be fair, any fat person to help them buy a gym membership, she didn't really need to return it to those people because apparently they're mortal enemies now.
Yes, that is quite fair.
But it was.
And can we all guess my response to this? All together now. 1, 2, 3. Cunt twat.
Got it.
I think
I
it's,
figured I would just underscore Don's rage here.
I think
He's
it's
transforming.
I think it's worth noting that this is not just some random woman. She is also a YouTube political commentator.
Of course she is.
So this is just kind of one of many things that she rants about online, and just kind of American Airlines, social media intern who
Oh, yeah.
on Twitter took that stance because they got a lot of people railing against them because, Sydney Watson has a large following, and people were just piling on this to.
And
pile on it.
she did get flack on Twitter as well, but I don't think nearly as much as she got support.
Yeah. Well, I think because
my thing is, what does she want American Airlines to do? Shoot them? I mean, what is your?
She wants them to be prevented from flying.
She doesn't want to have to see any fat people on her flight because they're too fat to fly.
Yes, and it reminds me of that classic thing of they should all get in the gym. Oh my God, they're in my gym. They should get out of here.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, it has nothing to do with health. I should say that the links in that article, there's an article to Travel Noir, which actually lists the plus size policies of various airlines.
Oh.
With Southwest, of course, at the top, and going down the list to, ever more draconian until you get to United, which is it's your responsibility to fit in our seats. And if you don't, get the fuck off.
Sorry, I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but I just want to go over this story again real quick. I was flying to Kansas. It was on a full flight. The airline seats were about the size of my knee, right? Like, it was physically painful for me sitting with the arm down. And the person next to me was just not, they were not being kind, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there was a woman behind me to the right who says to the person next to her, would you mind trading with that guy over there? And it basically invites me to come sit next to her and puts the arm up. And I'm apologizing to her for crowding her and all that stuff. And she's like, you don't worry about it. This is your seat. You are comfortable here. And she said very loudly over it, and that person over there was an asshole. And I'm just, again, thank you, woman out there, for making that trip for me. I can't even tell you how wonderful that was.
Especially because you're going to Kansas.
Oh my God, did I not want to be on that flight? I can't even tell you how much I did not want to be on that flight.
Because even when you get off, you're still in Kansas.
Yeah. I have to go through fucking hell to get to Kansas? No.
Is it safe to say, Don, that we're not in Kansas anymore?
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Well, I mean, I would, before you even went there, I was going to say, sometimes there's wicked witches on flights, and other times there's good witches.
Yes.
You'd think that your former seatmate would have taken their own broom.
Let's continue this journey into nightmares in pop culture with none other than Taylor Swift.
T-Swift.
I don't know. Apologies to any Swifties.
I don't know. I think this
in
is
the
just
audience.
a tempest in a teapot.
Yeah, I think Dan and I are maybe in agreement on this one. But
I don't know. I have a lot of feelings.
Let's set it up.
Yes.
So Taylor Swift came out with a new album called Midnights.
Yes.
And one of the songs on this album is called Antihero. And there's a video that came out with it as well, written, directed by Taylor Swift. And it's very much a sort of, it's a very unfiltered look into her own self-loathing. And it's an inspection of all of her mental issues as she sees them and presented in entertainment, music video, song form. And one of the moments in this video, she has sort of her alter ego that's like the cause of a lot of her anguish and anxiety. And she herself steps on a scale in this one scene, and the scale spins and spins and reads fat on it with no numbers, just fat.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then the alter ego kind of looks at her like, mm-hmm.
Yeah, you should be ashamed of yourself.
And then the song goes on.
And the song goes on. And it's an expression of her own self-loathing about this, this and many other
It's also the theme of the music video is kind of her fears. So there is like her being chased by ghosts, but it's very silly.
Mm-hmm.
There is
her being like this giant that doesn't fit, like this sort of ogre-sized giant.
And then at the same time, like how egotistical is it of her to think of herself as a giant? Because it's like you're sort of damned in both ways. Like, in the prison of fame, but you chose this prison. And it really is I think it's kind of brilliant in its examination of how everything just kind of is a house of mirrors, one thing turning into another thing and all of it being like, you can't win this.
Yeah, there's no winning. That's what I was thinking when I was watching. Because like she has so much privilege, she has so much going for her, and she is still going to be struggling with issues, but she can't talk about them. Like she can't talk about them because she has so much, but they're still going to impact her. And so what do? Do you hold on to it and just eat yourself from the inside out? Or do you express yourself as any artist would, which is what she did? And as you can imagine, she is taking huge amounts of flack, particularly for that one scene.
I mean, it's really the flack has mainly just been the depiction of fat on the scale as a pejorative, as like
a self-condemnation.
Yes.
Well, and she's talked about, and I think written music about having an eating disorder.
Yes.
And being anorexic. And
the criticism was, how dare you present an eating disorder for the people who have eating disorders because we're triggered by mentions of eating disorders. And it's like, but wait, I can't talk about my problem because it triggers you and having the same problem?
Yeah, I don't really buy that. I feel like if you're discussing yourself, like you can't get any more first person than this is my experience. And who dare steps in and say you don't get to discuss your experience?
And well, it's triggering, Don.
Yeah.
It's triggering.
Well, and so there's been a couple of things. There, Gianluca Russo, who we've talked about on the podcast, wrote in response saying, look, I'm not a Swift fan. It doesn't really matter. The point is that she's talking about herself, just what you were saying, Don, and that this exists in the world. And it's not, if you can't talk about a problem because you think that anybody who mentions the problem is perpetuating the problem, then how are you ever going to talk about the problem?
How are you ever going to actually address the issue?
Exactly.
I think what Trevor's talking about is specifically like people are reacting to her seemingly perpetuating the use of the word fat as a pejorative, as a negative. But my thought there is that she's not saying this is a good thing. This is true. She's not saying this is what we should be doing.
Which is abundantly clear from the context. She is saying this is what the uncontrollable dark side of my psyche yells at me when I see the number on the scale. Like so many other thousands of people, millions of people.
Yeah, but if anything, it's expressing sympathy.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I see both sides of this because, I was really reading a lot of different opinions. Gianluca Russo, Shira Rose, who is an eating disorder therapist who is also fat, was kind of talking about that it is just kind of to fat people a reminder of being people like just my existence is your worst fear. A lot of people were presenting like alternatives, like, well, this is how she could have done it without using fat. And like, I couldn't, a lot of them, like I couldn't, they were like trying to still use the scale imagery, but like present something other than fat. And I couldn't really understand what they were explaining.
I don't think there is another way to like, I'm of two minds. One, I don't think there's another way to tell that story effectively or even remotely effectively without doing what she did. She could have walked in front of a mirror and they showed a fat version of herself, and I think that would have been way worse.
Yeah.
And just from my perspective, like she is somebody who is trying to express a very personal point of view. It is literally just her point of view, and she is abundantly clear. She is not being coy about any of this. There's nothing, there's no hidden message. She literally has a scene and she literally says there's no hidden message here. She's not using like metaphor. She is, but in this particular case, she is literally just saying the inner voice in my head that hates me is calling me fat.
Right.
And I'm sorry, that's quite relatable.
Well,
like,
and
you can't.
it leads me. So much of what passes for activism is actually just trauma and making people wrong.
Yeah.
And that's not activism. That's not moving the needle. That's not helping people. That's just calling people out because you're triggered, you're traumatized, and you think everybody else has a responsibility to kowtow to that.
I do really see the side of it is, while it is personal, because Taylor Swift has this platform, and while it is personal, it is kind of centering like thin white woman around eating disorder world stuff, while a lot of fat people with eating disorders are ignored.
But she is a thin white woman.
No. But I'm just saying that because there are so many people who are fat suffering with eating disorders, struggling to get recognized and get treatment and get the help they need.
But she's not speaking for them.
No,
is
but it's
very specifically speaking for herself.
I know. Yes, but I'm just saying.
I just like how. At what point, like she has gone out of her way to say this is just my experience. She's not trying. Like she's not trying to stand up.
I feel like I get what you're saying, Trevor. I totally do.
Mhm.
But I feel like the only people who can truly argue that are people that are seeing it completely in its own context. Like everything else around it removed. It's just that one blip.
Well, I think
that exists,
there are a lot of people because of the nature of social media.
Yeah.
Who
that
have
are
only
just
seen that.
that.
Yep.
But also just like, I think because of how raw it is, once they get to that point, they can't, it just kind of pulls it out of the sequence. I also feel like that moment of the music video is so different tonally from everything else.
Is it?
I think because everything else is
so?
very comical. Like the ghosts are, they have the floral patterns. There's a lot of stuff with like blood where it's glittery. When she's a monster, it's very Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah, but then there is that
glamorous.
But there is that skit of like you killed our mother by pushing her out a window or off a balcony.
Yeah, but
Right.
that's still. That is still very comical. I mean, they have comedians.
I didn't. This is a 10-second scene. Like
No, I know,
Not
but I'm
even
just
that.
saying that.
it's if that it's.
But I think what Trevor's talking about, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Well, no, I can see why it would feel out like slightly tonally different because when you bring baggage to that scene, it will feel different.
If you're
Yeah.
bringing your own
But I
trauma to
think
it, then
if
yes,
you,
it's out of
if you look
context.
at it objectively, I don't think it does stick
Well,
out.
what I'm wondering is, because something Trevor said earlier made me think about this, where like in this age, like you'll see an article that says Trevor Swift does outrageous thing that insults fat people, and then they will show you that sliver, right?
Yes.
And then you've decided how you've reacted to it.
Well, you decide it's the truth.
Well, and then even if you go and you see the larger video,
You still
and
have
you're
that.
given the new context, many people will stick with their initial
Yes.
programmed thought. So I'm wondering how much of it is maybe that. It's just the nature of the world we live in, the way media is presented to us, that's causing more of these sort of crazy ass reactions where clearly people aren't thinking it all the way through.
I think there's something to
in
that.
some way. Yeah.
Yeah.
From my perspective.
Yeah. No.
I don't know. Like I said, I see both sides. I don't think either side is necessarily right. I think it is just kind of a unwinnable thing, especially because it is so tied to. This is like Taylor Swift being like, "This is my experience,"
Which is the whole point of the video.
Right.
It's the entire
No,
message
but
of the
I
video
get
that
what
this is an
Trevor's
unavailable,
saying.
this is an unavoidable, unwinnable
She
battle.
wins no way. So I'll put this out there, and then I don't know. Maybe we move on after this. But as somebody who, I am typically fairly quiet about dealing with my own body image and eating disorder issues. This makes me want to never bring it up again.
Mm-hmm.
Like I, as somebody who is not fat, I feel like I could never, like this vitriol makes me want to never talk about this again. And that is like patently unhealthy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
That's not good.
It proves the point that you have to have the right identity to talk about a particular problem.
Right. And that's I feel that's problematic.
Mm-hmm.
That's my
Yeah.
ultimate
Especially
takeaway.
when discussing about this, like you're not actually like when you're talking about your body issue, right?
Mm.
You're not actually talking about fat. You're talking about self-perception,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
But if it's shutting down conversations about fat, like it's not even shutting down the conversation that you want to have. It's very weird.
Yeah.
You know?
It's complicated. I don't think there's any clear-cut version of this story. But anyway,
we're gonna.
Hey, do you hear the eagle?
Switching tones,
I hear the eagle.
wildly veering
Yeah.
the ship in a
Eagle,
different direction.
I call you.
It's like getting rescued from Saruman's tower.
Yeah.
Exactly. I'm so glad you get that reference.
We're out of the nightmare. We're lifted.
Hi
We're
ho,
soaring.
eagle! Away!
It's still a little spooky, but it's good spooky. It's
It's folksy spooky.
yeah, it's like I don't know, like New England fun witch movie. Like
You want me to play that
practical
witch sound
magic.
effect again, don't you?
No, because I don't feel like that witch sound effect is practical magic. I mean, I guess maybe Diane Wiest kind of could do that witch laugh.
Anyway, what are we talking about?
We are talking about Mama Cass.
Or Cass Elliot.
Yes,
as
Cass
she would
Elliot.
probably prefer to be called.
For those of you not familiar with Mama Cass, she was one of the singers in the Mamas and the Papas in the 1960s. And she's probably one of the mothers of like that whole culture.
Defined
That- yeah.
folk music.
She
Yeah.
defined folk music.
She and the Mamas and the Papas as a
Yeah.
group collectively,
Yeah.
and then herself independently. All of that music we associate with
Yeah.
sort of the folk rock
she's
of the 60s.
probably one of the most iconic figures
Yeah.
of that genre.
But she was
And she was fat.
Yeah.
fat and therefore and a woman, and so she was very much disparaged and marginalized.
Mhm.
Yeah. Even down to her death. She
Yes.
died of a heart attack at like
32.
32. But even though she died of a heart attack, common knowledge says that she died of choking to death on a ham
I
sandwich.
love the shortcutting here. Like, it's not even, well, of course she was fat and died of a heart attack because they all die of heart attacks. No,
She was eating.
She had
Yeah.
eating. She had eating disorders and drug use, but we don't talk about that. It's because she was fat. But that's not good enough. That's not good enough. The urban legend is she died of eating a ham sandwich and choking on it.
Which is just
But
not true.
this article is covering the fact that she is just now, thanks to the efforts of her daughter, getting her star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame.
Yay!
Which, like, I was kind of shocked to find out that she didn't have one already.
Yeah.
Well, as I said, being fat and female, marginalized.
Yeah, it's
But the article that we're talking about in Variety, like it's the sort of like the fun like wrap up to the article is like she gets the star ultimately. Like,
Yeah.
like the daughter gets her the star. But I mean, they do this sort of. It's not even like a biographical look at her life. It's a look at her impact on musical culture.
Yeah.
Which is so important.
And also
good
her,
article.
her relationship. Like one of the things they talk about towards the end is how she never really had a steady boyfriend. Like she never really, as her daughter puts it, she never really got to experience like loving someone and dating them and having a partner, which is really, really sad. And it was an odd thing because in talking about, you know, her dating life and maybe the lack thereof, her friend, her good friend, John Sebastian sort of had this to say. He says, the thing is she had so many boyfriends, though they were not necessarily sleeping with her. We all adored her and would have taken a shot if we'd had the chance. There were times when I'd say, Cass, what are you doing tonight? And she'd answer, John, I'd put you in the hospital. Like that was how she got around folks with whom she wanted to maintain a friendship. Her weight wasn't an issue with me. I'm Italian. Every beautiful thing that ever happened to me as a kid happened as a result of a very large woman. So like they chose
That's
to
a great
include,
quote.
like they chose to include this in Variety. Like they didn't have to do that. And I kind of love that. Like that's he doesn't come out and say he's a chaser, but that's certainly the words that a chaser would say. And that feels really good to me. And it's a shame that she wasn't able to experience that in her life. So a star in the Hollywood Walk of Fame is like a small token of appreciation way, way later.
Yeah. Listen to some Cass Elliot. It's I was actually listening to a lot of Cass Elliot, Mamas and the Papas, like early pandemic.
Oh, really?
Is this kind of like I don't know.
there's something mournful
It's
about a lot of
and
their
soothing.
songs.
It's
Yeah.
very like
And you know, if you're not really into that kind of music, it's okay. There's a Scooby-Doo episode where Cass Elliot helps the team solve the mystery. And I can recommend that.
Is
I
that-
did
She
not
has
know
a-
that.
that what you related
She has
to?
like a candy factory or something. It's a
Oh,
little-
that's awesome.
It's fun, but it's also like this is problematic. But I'm just gonna
Just
I'm
gonna
gonna have a
Because
good
of
time.
course she has a candy factory.
Gloss.
I feel like if you get to be an animated guest star on Scooby-Doo, here's your star on the Walk of
You've
Fame.
made it. That's right. Shouldn't that be the entrance exam?
Yeah.
It's like, have you been in the Scooby-Doo celebrity episode?
damn it, I haven't.
Have you been on a Scooby-Doo episode or have you talked with a Muppet? You know, like,
Yeah.
I would say talking
Yeah.
being on Sesame Street. That should do it too. Anyway, speaking of Sesame Street, no,
So
very much the opposite of that.
then thunderclap, Michael.
Oh,
Yes, we're back in spooky mode. Spooky vibes, scary vibes, squirmy vibes.
Squirmy vibes. We are talking about the feature film, horror feature film Piggy.
Yes.
Which we've been hyping up.
becoming a yearly tradition for us. Like, if you haven't heard our earlier Thinner episode
From
where
last
we-
year.
very worth going back.
Where we, for clarity, where we discussed the movie Thinner.
It's not a thinner episode.
Yeah,
it's
I
not
could
a
have been
thinner
clearer
episode.
on that, I suppose. Yeah.
Capital T thinner.
But anyway, we are going to spoil the shit out of this movie. So go see it and then come back.
Well,
Yeah.
okay. So as a preface, because I was tweeting about, because I watched it last night and I was tweeting that I was all energized, and someone's like, I feel like from the description it could be very triggering. It will definitely be triggering.
This is not this movie does not shy away from anything.
Yeah, and I feel like the description I feel like gives you sufficient content warnings, and also it's a horror movie.
I mean, the image gives you sufficient content warning.
So before we I don't think we did a very good job of this last year, and so I want to do a better job this year. Let's just give a quick plot summary.
Yes.
So that when we talk about it, like we can actually talk about things that people will remember.
Yeah.
So the movie focuses very much from the point of view of Sarah, who is a fat teenager in Spain, in a small town in Spain. And she and her family own and work at a butcher shop. And the kids in the town, and particularly one of her ex-friends who now hangs out with the popular kids, all make fun of her and her family for being fat. They call them Piggy. There's social media bullying. There's also in-person bullying. And it's really traumatizing. They do not shy away from the intensity of it. She goes to swim by herself because she doesn't want to be seen around anybody. She wants to be able to swim peaceably. And the bullies find her. They try and drown her with a pool strainer.
Like a net.
And it's really, really brutal. Like it is horrifying in its own way. And then we don't know if he's a serial killer, but a killer.
He's definitely a serial killer.
definitely
Yeah,
a serial
probably
killer.
a serial killer. Sees this happening, seems to have some kind of sympathy for Sarah, and I think in direct reaction to seeing this bullying, kidnaps the three girls.
Goes
that
after
did the
her
bullying,
bullies, yeah.
Goes after her bullies, and Sarah sees it happen as she's being chased from the pool back to her home, literally being chased by boys, by being driven off the road, like crying all the
and
time.
it should be said, she's doing this almost naked because they have stolen her clothes.
They've stolen her clothes
stole
and
her
her
towel
phone.
and her phone. And so she sees him like hauling one of the girls into his van, bleeding.
Yeah.
It sees him, he sees her, and she freezes, and he drops a towel for her before driving away and leaving her alone. And she now has the choice: do I say something to the police that these girls are missing, and I know they're being hurt and they're in trouble, and I know where this happened, and I know why, and I know who he is. She's seen his face. Or do I agree with him that they need to be punished and hope that I can just sort of deal with that?
And the stakes keep rising because then she finds out, oh, it's not just her friends. There was a waitress kidnapped and is
And
missing.
the lifeguard.
And the
lifeguard was
lifeguard,
murdered.
whom she actually swims past at the bottom of a pool.
Yeah.
without realizing.
Without realizing
Yeah.
it. And then
Great
it's like,
shot.
and then, the parents of the kids are like coming to her, like, you know something. I know you know something. So the stakes keep rising for her. And I like this movie. Trevor loved this movie.
I love this movie.
I did too.
I would feel like maybe I almost feel like someone could listen to this like if they're on the fence about watching it, listen to the episode and still watch it, just because there is such a intensity to the movie. I feel like talking about it does not really capture the experience of
Yeah.
watching it.
Yeah.
The movie is masterfully using tone and
Oh,
the oppressiveness of the world. You have to see it to understand it.
Yeah.
There were so many moments. Like, I know, Michael, one of your pet peeves about a film is when you feel manipulated by the filmmaker.
cheaply.
Yeah. I didn't feel manipulated, but I was taken to places, emotional places that I was so surprised I could be taken.
Yes.
And feeling sympathy, feeling, like, oh, but he's a good serial killer.
Oh my!
I was all about it. I was on board for serial killer boy.
Oh yeah.
There's this kind of internet subculture phenomenon of Columbiners, which is like, it was a Tumblr thing, and it was teenage girls, like modern, like more like modern teenage girls. Think like, I don't know, early 2010s, obsessed with the Columbine killers.
Oh yeah.
And kind of being like fangirls for them, or like serial killers.
The Boston marathon bomber had the same thing. He was the
and
hot
even
guy.
and like I mean, Ted Bundy,
Dahmer.
Yeah.
And this movie kind of gave me some insight into that like mindset, and just the.
Can I just put a pin in what you just said? It's not that it's in keeping with those. It gives you insight into how that's possible.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the feel, like you talking about the feelings you're able to feel, this movie so captures the like intensity and violent shifts of like when you are a teenager, every feeling you feel is so intense.
On 11.
Yeah.
And this just captures that, and like the intensity. There's a moment when, so the girls who were taken had her phone, so she goes to get her phone. And I love that this movie feels like timeless but also modern, because like cell phones are a thing, but it almost just feels like an
I was having a hard
afterthought,
time placing where in time it happened. You're right. It's sort of an amorphous.
because there's this whole thing of like explaining find your phone. And so she's trying to find her
Well, to
phone.
be fair, it's explaining find your phone
For the audience.
to the adults.
Yeah.
Well, then mostly to the adults, and by extension to the audience.
Yeah.
But so she's trying to find her phone. And when she's looking for her phone, she runs into the parents of the missing girls, like looking separately. And so she's trying to hide from them. She also sees the killer and runs into him. And they have this moment where it's the killer and her hiding.
Yeah.
And there's also like this festival happening in town. So there's fireworks. And he's kind of like holding her face, telling her to be quiet. And it's this weird thing of like, oh, are they going to kiss? It's like, I don't want them to kiss, but like, I kind of want them to kiss.
Yes.
Well, and it's just like such an intense moment. And it's just so palpable of this, like the fear and the excitement and the rage and the pain and the anguish and like just so many things happening all at once.
I think what is so alarming and beautiful about the film and that relationship, right? The bullied Sarah and the serial killer. There's been a lot made of like, oh, you see, if you bully a kid, they turn into serial killers. And then a lot of people in the fat community says, hell, if all it took were bullying to be a serial killer, then every fat person would be a serial killer. So there's this thing about responsibility and what do you do? And I really thought this was a beautiful coming together of the fat bullied girl and the guy who turned into a serial killer. And they have an unconscious and visceral understanding of each other.
Yep.
And it is it's not even a sexual attraction. It is oh my God, you get me. And she even says to her mother, she's screaming at her mother, you don't understand me. You don't understand me. And nobody understands her. And he understands her. And I love also that he has almost no lines. I think he says Sarah a couple of times.
Yeah.
And he says come back a couple of times. And he's also very much outside the world. Like he doesn't look like he comes from this village. And it's really beautiful how there is this intimacy that is not sexual between them, but of a meeting of
so
minds.
deeply intense. Though.
So intense and so intimate,
Yeah.
like I said, from a psychological point of view.
I'm curious to what Michael has to say about this, because I feel like
I had a very different experience of this movie. I've been sort of waiting to.
I think it is a very polarizing movie. I think people will have very different reactions to it.
So I don't disagree with most of what you guys are talking about. Like I think it really handles so many of these issues really head on. Like it doesn't shy away. And it helped me, I will say, because of how the movie is shot, particularly around like showing Sarah her body in all of different ways, intimate moments. She's masturbating in one scene. It helped me to know that this movie was written and directed by a woman. And a woman, I think, with personal experience of being bullied as a fat girl. Because I had to read an interview with her after I watched this to kind of contextualize what I had just seen.
Yeah, that seemed to be important to you. Yeah.
Yeah, because I was totally bought in until, she's witnessed the kidnapping. She knows things are going horribly wrong. She runs upstairs to eat the pastry treat that she sort of hides in her room, but she's out. And
you mean she's escaped the killer?
No,
what do you mean she's out?
She's out of them. She has no more.
Oh, she's run out of food.
Oh, she's out running.
She's run out of the can.
Right. She doesn't have any more. And then he throws one through her window. He throws one through her window. She runs over to the window, grabs it, looks out briefly, and then immediately starts eating it. And that was a really tough moment for me. Not talking the issues of why she's eating and how they use it in the movie aside.
Yeah.
It's purely the logic of that moment. She didn't bother to hey, who did this? Is this poisoned? Is this tampered with? Is it all of the things that would have gone through my mind in that moment of what the fuck is this doing here? Why is something
I'll tell, I think I have an answer for that, but
the movie doesn't care about that.
Well,
That's the
it doesn't.
answer.
It doesn't, because it is very clearly depicted, for better or for worse, I think for worse, that she runs to sugar to pacify herself psychologically. And so when he throws the sugary treat through the window, of course, she leaps upon it like a tiger that hasn't been fed in a month.
Yeah, like a little piggy.
Like a little piggy. And it's one of those things where yes, there are people who do that. And no, we don't want to represent fat people that way.
Right.
On that note, I interpreted it differently actually than both of you in that. So at that point, I was really kind of interested in the bond between the two of them.
Yeah.
There was clearly some sort of understanding going on.
Yeah.
And
even from a distance,
that action to me, it became less about feeding the fat person as much to me, it was a sign of understanding. He knew her. He saw her trying to buy this thing and having to put it back.
And that's how I took it too.
So he bought it for her.
Yeah, there's a scene where
followed her home,
there's
returns it. And so when she eats it, right, I think she knew who put it there. I think she knew where that came from.
And she knew that he wouldn't harm her because he didn't.
Yes.
And the conscious choice of eating it was not just a sign of trust on her part, but a visual trust.
Yeah,
yes.
It should be said. It should be said that they actually set this up rather carefully.
Yeah.
So there's a scene. The scene that sets this up is she's going to the store to get a light bulb for her dad, and he's like, "Oh, get something for yourself." And she's buying these pies, and
These the candy.
they're like little fruit pies almost. And the clerk at the store is like, "Oh, be it on your head if you buy
I'll
these.
sell it to you, but it'll be on your head if you do."
And she puts them away, and the guy, the killer, is at the store, kind of watching her, and he's buying something else, and the clerk is putting them away, and he slides them over.
And anyone, by the way, who thinks that is untrue or just a weird setup, that has happened to me in the past. So
That a clerk has said something about food.
yeah, or when I've chosen not to buy something, it's been good for you.
Yeah.
I'm like, why are you? So I understood exactly where she was.
And when I saw that, when they set that up, that he's going to give her the pies, I was like, oh God, we're doing this. This is going to be the thing. But then when it's thrown through her window, her mother has just put her on a diet and, gave her a salad for dinner and is kind of scolding her. So she has left that moment of a very familiar to fat people, you have to be on a diet, blah, blah, blah. And
even though everybody in the family is fat, she has to be on the diet.
Yes.
Because she's the one getting bullied, and that's the solution to bullying.
Yes. And there's just other than the, bullying and the serial killer stuff going on, there's also just a lot of intense stuff with her mom and the mom not intervening in bullying about her weight, and the mom kind of putting her on a diet as this is how I'm going to help you. This is how this is going to stop it. And so the moment where the pie goes through the window and it is just this release, it is just a glimmer of I can get this brief, and I like that. There's another moment later on where he gives her a pie. And I like that it is don't you listen to what other people say. It is kind of the you indulge those feelings you have that people are telling you are wrong.
Which he understands so very well.
So I took it as like an extension of, because I was really looking for the like, oh, are we going to do the whole like fat person is uncontrollable with eating? But I took it as a metaphor for that, like you
Understanding
and just like you express that. Because I was very on the fence about the pie thing.
I was
for
too.
the reason that you were, Michael.
One of the other things that stuck in my mind about that was that her moments of eating in her bedroom, her secret eating, is literally the only thing she has control of in this entire movie.
Yeah.
Right? That's the only thing that she takes action for and can have on her own. And
Yeah, she doesn't even have her own computer. They share a computer as a family.
And his giving that to her is not only an act of, I understand what your comfort is and here is comfort, but it's also an act of, it's the only act of kindness
Yes.
showed to her.
Yes.
The entire movie. The only person who shows any kindness is him.
Is the serial killer.
And that is the second act of kindness he shows her in that piece.
When I think it's so like I ended up being fine with the pie thing, but I was very apprehensive about it because it is such a, like, fat people aren't allowed to enjoy food. I think especially in, a movie. And it was, I think I kind of like that I had this push and pull reaction to it. And this like, because that was so much of everything in the movie. And these intense feelings, which I feel like kind of goes back to the, like, this is such a good teen horror movie because there's so much other than the killing that is just like, it is everything is about intensity.
Yeah.
But I'm curious. So, Michael, I know that like the pie thing was hard for you and kind of took you to a place. I want to know more about like, was that the big thing? What were other things?
No.
There's so many other things.
No, that was just the start. So I have two ways I can go. I don't disagree with anything you're saying about the way the characters are handled, the way that it's represented, like the way that they present her, the characters, the relationships, all that stuff. Like I don't disagree with any of that. I had a lot of problems with how it was shot. And I had a lot of problems with how it's the same thing I ran into with The Ritz. Like there's no other person in this movie who is sympathetic to her or appreciates what she looks like, which makes a powerful statement, right? Because the one guy who is, it creates a bond with them. But the one guy who is a like psychotic killer who feeds her. And my frustration is that, much like The Whale, somebody's going to watch and say, "Oh, I get your experience. Like, I get what you like." It just like if my mom watches that movie, she's going to put me in his shoes.
Oh, okay.
It's
and
funny.
that feels
How
very
interesting.
crappy to me.
Yeah, of course it would. Of course it would.
I can see that, but I was very like once. Even before we started watching it, I'd seen the short, which is basically like kind of the 15-minute pool segment of this movie. There was Piggy was initially a short that I feel like was probably shot as proof of concept, but I was like, is it going to be the whole like evil chubby chaser / feeder / just like deviant? And I feel that, but I also feel like it was not explicitly sexual. I feel like it was one of those things where it was just, it rode that line, and it's because it's from like the perspective of Sarah, so everything is so intense. And just because, we go to that place when it is an, older dangerous man and a young girl that like, I mean, it is nefarious because it's like, he's a serial killer. So like that is nefarious, but I almost feel like it is this representation of darkness and wanting to like the pull of the darkness. I agree that like if your mom watched that, she'd be like, "Oh my God, Michael."
But I think even if she didn't put me in those shoes, she would want me to explain how I was different from that. And like, I don't want to be compared to that.
I feel like I want to respond to this as the other chaser in the room.
Sure. Chaser.
So everything you're saying, Michael, I'm sort of gobsmacked because what you're saying is like, oh my God, totally. And as a very, very out chubby chaser for many, many years, I am no stranger to that sort of treatment as just being, even if you just say chubby chase, you're like, oh, well, so are you a predator or are you just fucked up? And like, there's that just tacit assumption, or the assumption that a lot of straight chubby chasers face of like, well, a real man would go after a real woman, not a fat woman. And there's this awful, awful prejudice. And I never once felt that, never even thought that until you just said it. And I'm thinking to myself, gosh, why did I never think that? If anything, because I was a fat kid, I totally got that relationship because I much more identified with her than I did with him.
I think that's exactly it.
But what I was going to say is, I think the other reason that I didn't see it, because I'm very much on the lookout for how are chubby chasers being, being seen, because, hello, that's me and mine. And I think the difference was part of what Trevor says. It was never our exposure to the relationship is as kindness, not as sexual, not as attraction. It is from the very first moment when he knows.
I disagree with that.
Well, no, because the first interaction they have is he leaves a towel for her.
It's both.
That's the second interaction.
Well, no, I mean, I don't know. I think it can just be intimacy. I think you can have all those scenes.
She makes it sexual.
Well, yeah, but yes. And that was
maybe so. But when my point is
explicitly so.
Sure,
she masturbates to the memory of him almost kissing her.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, but I think
that doesn't make him the predator.
I'm not saying it does. I'm saying they don't.
Mind.
They're not doing this like innocent thing of like, oh, he's just being kind to her and she just
no.
appreciates
You're right.
Yeah.
But I'm saying in his motivations, I see her buying the candy that she was denying herself.
So what do you think? What was his end goal of taking her?
I will say that because I won't say this because so the moment where she makes it sexual, but I think it's what I see the relationship between them as is he says I think it is he sees the same darkness in her that he sees in himself.
He assaults her family and kidnaps her. Like what part of that? Like explain that to me.
Rescue.
Explain that to me how this
rescue.
And what's his end goal?
I think he wants a partner in crime. I was rooting for them to be a couple.
I don't know.
That's how far gone I was.
I don't know if I ever saw him wanting a partner in crime. What I saw was he saw her in a moment of loneliness, right? Where she's being assaulted at the pool, right? And then reacts with a kindness by in his mind, by doing terrible things to people who did that. And then when she sees him, her reaction is not horror at the thing that he's doing. They are both joined by their loneliness is the way I see it. And the desire to overcome loneliness, sexual or not, is so powerful that I felt that from the two of them. And her family, she lived with a family that left her alone. Like to his mind, I could see that being an absolute crime.
And I know, Michael, to answer your question, because he is doing that to give her the push because it is the same thing where kind of the end sequence where he gives her the knife because it is and guiding her into, it is like,
he says, we'll do this
partially
together.
Because she is not making any choices.
Yeah, because he is.
Up until that, she chooses nothing up until then, except to conceal him.
And that's where I got the partners in crime, because he takes the knife, puts it in her hand. He says, we'll do this together. And she takes the knife. And
that's valid.
Yeah. And she thinks,
haven't thought of that.
And she's got the knife and she's going towards the girls. And like, I got to say, I'm rooting for them. I mean, I'm rooting for the serial killer and
that
Sarah.
was a point. That was one of the points I wanted to talk about with the movie. Is like, for me, the movie is not a horror movie. The movie was a thriller to me. Right? I was never afraid.
It's gory, but that's as far as it goes.
Yeah. But the horrible element of that movie to me was the way it made me react to the people in her world.
Yes.
She makes the good choice, right? Pretty much through most of it, right? There's a pretty key moment where she doesn't, but through the most of it, she makes the effort to rescue these girls. She makes the effort but I didn't want her to make those choices.
I am so there with you,
I was
Don.
kind of angry at her, for all these things.
I am right there with you. Yeah.
And I hate that reaction in myself. I wish I was able to react the way she did, but no, my instant reaction is like, oh, you dummy. Like, why would you? No, they deserve this.
Especially when one of her bullies is strung up. One of her bullies and that bully is pleading for rescue. And even the pleading for rescue, she insults her. She insults the fat girl.
Yeah, after she has rescued both of them, they are no longer in immediate threat of death. She says, "Why aren't you untying me, Piggy?" At which point I'm like, and then you hear the gun go off, and I just assumed she'd shot her.
Yeah.
Well,
And you were hoping, right?
I was hoping. I was like,
To be clear, that's not what happened.
No.
The Sarah kills the killer,
Mm-hmm.
and the girl hanging up there says, "What did you do, Piggy?" That's what she says.
I thought that was the girl on the floor.
That was so impossible for me to believe. That was like,
I've been through it.
how like a character whose only hope of rescue is standing right in front of her and to insult. Like, that's just,
I'm sorry.
that was so idiotic.
For me, Michael, that was simply called junior high school.
That was so intensely idiotic. It was like, I'm out.
To me, it was the culmination of the privilege and the contempt that you'd seen through the entire movie.
I mean, sure. Like, yes,
know?
on paper, that is what that is. I just didn't buy it.
Yeah, like I said, having lived through a lot of those things where
And
like,
this was
do you
the
not
other-
get what I'm here to do for you and you're still going to insult me?
This was the other interesting thing to me was that, again, and like, I don't like these reactions in myself, right? When he had chopped up sort of the obvious bad girl, the obvious mean one, I think that was supposed to be sort of like the comeuppance for the really bad one. But for me, she wasn't the worst.
Mm-mm.
The worst one was the friend.
Yeah.
The friend who betrayed that friendship, who knew what that person was and turned her back on her. Right.
Yeah.
Again, in order to get a better life.
I love
And was aware of what she was doing.
Yeah, that's what happened to me between 5th grade and 6th grade.
Yep. And I wanted her.
Mm-hmm.
I like when her hand got blown off
Yeah.
and she's hanging the one hand. I'm like, that's not enough.
and
She needs more.
so when her hand gets blown off when Sarah is kind of grappling with the killer before she kills him, and it also blows off the friendship bracelet,
Yes.
which I just thought was a neat. I'm like, huh.
I thought that was great.
No, I loved so when Sarah kills the serial killer,
Mhm.
her ripping out his throat, just
Yeah.
like biting his throat and just ripping out flesh was extremely, satisfying. And just, I love just the visceralness.
Hold on.
of that.
Why?
Because at that point, I felt like I was full of all of the emotions that Sarah had at that point. And everything, like I said, all of these emotions were so intense. And it was just in rejecting that darkness, she was kind of releasing it and
Into him,
but also just like this, it was just releasing all of this rage from everyone and at him, rage at her family, rage at him, rage at herself for rejecting this because it is the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And that she is going to free her friends and she's going to go and give up this path that she could have gone down.
yeah.
This movie also did one thing. It helped me understand one thing that I think I've missed in the past, which was sort of the fundamental difference between a fat boyhood and a fat girlhood, right? Where that, I felt like I was always condemned for my body, but I never felt like anyone else felt like they owned my body. And in this movie, everyone around her feels an ownership of her body. When she gets bullied by the girls, they feel like they can kill her. When she gets bullied by boys after that event, they feel like they're perfectly entitled to put their hands all over her body and jiggle her and take her top off.
Well, that's just, I think that's again how women are treated. In a
Right.
particular
But I'm saying, but that's a critical difference for me.
I agree with you.
To understand, like, because I've always sort of felt like the fat female experience and the fat male experience is closer than it's farther apart. But that's a pretty fundamental difference that I don't think I've ever experienced.
Yeah. And again, I love that the movie showed you that.
Yeah.
That's pretty great.
In an awful way. Like,
Yeah.
Oh God. One of the things that I thought was so interesting about the movie is that so many of the people that I really wanted to see punished didn't really get punished.
I was glad that the guys came back and kind of got punished.
They got scattered a little bit, but I wanted one of them to get crushed.
One of them
Like,
broke his arm.
Well,
They
hurt
jumped
his
off a
arm.
ledge.
Hurt his arm, yeah.
did he? Oh.
I mean, two of them jumped off
Yeah.
the ledge at the end of the driveway, and
Yeah.
one of them, I'm assuming, broke his arm.
All we know is hurt his arm. He says, my arm.
He said, my fucking arm. Yeah. I feel like most people that made fun of her got punished.
Yeah.
Not enough.
Like her family got attacked. Well, maybe not, but like her entire family got attacked.
I think her parents are dead.
Yeah, like
I
her
actually
parents are.
don't. I had
know.
this conversation with someone else, and
don't know.
I really don't believe either of them died. The mom, to me, was clearly still alive, and the dad is saying something from upstairs. So
Yeah.
They're both bleeding on the ground, and her mom closes her eyes and falls to the ground. I think you could make the argument either way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's intentionally not answered.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, we had a lot of feelings about Piggy. A lot of feels, a lot of thoughts.
Did you have more you wanted to say?
No, because I don't think it's interesting for me to go into like
Okay.
technical quibbles. I think focusing on the topic of the show is more important.
But yeah, I mean, I would recommend it, but I walk into it with the mindset of a thriller for me, because with the horror notes weren't being hit.
A gory thriller, to be sure.
A gory thriller, but like, is Seven a horror movie or is Seven a thriller?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We got a tip. Just
We
a
do.
spooky tip.
Spooky tip.
So Chubster has a roundup of, it's, this is dropping before Halloween. If you need a last minute Halloween costume, Chubster has some ideas. They have some links to costumes places, also Amazon, and then also like some DIY ideas. So, need a last minute spooky costume? Chubster has you covered. Well, do we have a spooky bit?
A spooky bit.
We have a terrifying bit.
I'm scared.
Terrifying.
Terrifying, sort of, if you're keeping kosher. So since we're doing a bit on Piggy this week, I thought we might go into some history of famous piggies.
Famous piggies. Okay.
Famous piggies.
Miss Piggy.
Arnold.
I mean, probably.
We got a few. All right. So starting off with the most famous pig of all pigs is Porky Pig, of course. He's been around with us
Hey
since
now.
the 1930s.
Trevor begs to differ.
Yeah, there we go. That's it.
So Porky Pig has a history that starts back in like the 1930s. He's been around for a long time, and he's actually gone through several evolutions and changed his look over the years. By the 1940s, Porky Pig had evolved into a leaner, sort of more streamlined character than his original version. When Bob Clampett started directing new Porky Pig shorts in the 1940s, though, he wanted to redesign the character back towards its fatter original design, but producer Leon Schlesinger wouldn't let him. Since he couldn't make Porky fat, he went ahead and made another Merry Melodies character fat instead.
Oh my.
Okay.
Which character found himself with a much expanded waistline in the 1940s instead of Porky Pig? And I'm not giving choices this time around.
Okay.
You all have to scan your memory banks.
Is it a character that has remained fat since then?
It is a famous character that you are very familiar with. I think you could argue whether or not he's fat.
Buzz.
Elmer Fudd.
Oh,
We got a
I
buzz
was
over
going
here.
to say Elmer Fudd after
So,
buzzing.
The one who buzzed gets the point. Trevor,
Oh.
Elmer Fudd is correct. It's interesting. I looked at a sort of a
Technicalities.
timeline of both characters, and Porky Pig actually was a very different body shape when he started.
Oh, yeah.
Very different.
Quite
He was
rotund.
Porky.
Yeah. But during the 1940s, he was already sort of like the sort of pleasantly chubby pig we know now. But Elmer Fudd got a very different body type in the 1940s than what we know him as now. It's very interesting. Babe. The talking pig that's the lead in the movie Babe is a combination of an animatronic double and how many real Yorkshire piglets?
Oh my.
How many piglets did they have to use to film Babe? Keeping in mind that filming can take 18 months or longer with some of these things. And piglets grow up really fast.
400.
They're literally bred to get big as fast as possible.
Oh my. Oh my.
Are we getting things? Or?
Nope. All of these are open-ended questions. Take a guess. And this one is going to be Price of Right rules. Price of Right.
Buzz. 17 and a half.
Bidding. Okay, we got it. We got 17.
Because that way, if somebody guesses 17, wait, it's the
If they guess 18,
closest
you're
without
screwed.
going over.
Closest without going over.
Okay.
119.
119. 17, 119.
17 and a half.
I don't know if that half is getting it.
You can't do half a pig. You
Can't
gotta
you?
go whole hog.
There you go. I'm going to go for 37.
37. Well, the correct answer is 48. So Dan has scored his first point today.
Yes, I know my
Okay.
piglets.
I thought this was interesting.
48.
A makeup artist had to add a toupee and eyelashes to each of the 48 pigs
Oh my God.
during filming.
I'm imagining like a pig just screaming and thrashing as someone is trying to put eyelashes on it.
Because I mean, I would scream in pat.
Wait, eyelashes or eyebrows?
Eyelashes.
Oh my God.
Yes.
Actually, now I'm also picturing a pig with those like huge, like swoopy eyelashes, like the ridiculously huge.
Well, at
ones.
least they weren't trying to put lipstick on
The
the
Betty
pig.
Boop eyelashes.
Yes.
Wow.
Swat, swat.
All right, last but not least, Miss Piggy, one of the most famous Muppets in the world, is no stranger to scandal. From interspecies relationships in the 70s to domestic violence, she's seen her fair share of time in the spotlight for her choices. What scandal did she confess to in 1984 while appearing on the Merv Griffin show?
Buzz.
Oh, Dan.
I don't know if this is true, but it would be good. Eating bacon.
Eating bacon. Okay. We got 1 point
That would
for
be
eating
good.
bacon.
That would be good.
I'm gonna say cosmetic surgery.
Cosmetic surgery.
Oh, that would be in the right time. Yeah.
She admitted to having implants.
Okay.
Having implants got.
So we have eating bacon, appearing in, having cosmetic surgery, and having a very specific type of cosmetic surgery. The correct answer, I'm actually giving the point to Dan. It is appearing in bacon commercials.
Oh.
That's dark.
That's very dark.
That's pretty.
Frank Oz actually came up with a very detailed history of Miss Piggy's early life story, being raised over a butcher shop by her parents. Her father liked to get around with the sows, so to speak, and her mom was sort of abusive. It's this like big Hollywood epic that he made up.
That's great. That's great.
Oh,
So, were you raised above a butcher shop, listener? Trevor, if they were, where could they go to tell us about that experience?
Well, we're on Instagram and Twitter as at Big Fat Gay Pod. We're on Facebook as the Big Fat Gay Podcast. Leave us 5 stars. 5 stars on Apple. 5 stars everywhere. Support us on Patreon at patreon.com/bigfatgaypod. See the articles we talked about at www.bigfatgaypod.com. Well, maybe you're in the middle seat on an airplane. You're listening to the podcast, and then you look to your left, and it's me. And you look to your right, and it's Don. And then your tray table pops down, and it's Michael.
Watch out!
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween, everybody! Don't get too
Scooby Dooby Doo.